right. Yes. Right, I suppose.
Where did you find this one?
Dolls. Quite a lot of people here knew Rennie, and he had these big dolls quite a bit before I knew him. And I think he thought it was a good idea as an interlude in his song bit in the folk song clubs, and also when he was singing with the Crocker lads and interluding their sets that they did in the song clubs. And also he was a percussionist, played drums, bones, washboard, well, anything that you can bang, clash or rattle.
Fate?
Yes, everything. And he regarded this as a percussion instrument, the jig doll. And so that's why he made this one and this one, which is what he used generally in the folk clubs. The rest have sort of added on. The family keeps growing. So that's what happened with these. Shall we have a little dance with this one? Anybody going to play us a little bit of music?
You bloody stopped me. I was playing and you bloody said tag it on
Then you're next, Diana.
Oh, what? Yes.
Well, you're next in line. We're going to go around. Into it?
This is the very first puppet that I made, Patrick, and he was made as a marionette. I just saw it in a book and I had to do a project, so I thought, well, I'll make a marionette. And he had 9 strings on him, but I didn't have a marionette state, so it was very difficult to perform with him, and so eventually he got strung up on a pegboard, and he's quite heavy, but Alan manages him behind the knee. But this is my first puppet, that's why it's quite flat on the face. I think he's about, how old is he? About 8 years old now, 7 or 8 years old. And he's seen more of life and earned more money than any of my other puppets. And he just goes on the street. And he's in Jack and the Beanstalk.
You trust that other bloke behind you.
Well, Jack did, because he bought the beans off him. You see. This is Ernest Picklethwaite. And they both perform as tabletop puppets. They've got a handle at the back, and they just move and walk and act. And so sometimes they get strung up when times are lean.
Going to do as a little dance with him?
Yes, I will do.
He lost his pipe, yeah, he keeps going. The elusive pipe.
How do you pull the sponge packet out of the shape?
It's carved with, first of all with a knife, a big bread knife, and then I snip it with scissors. And some bits are added on. I think he's got a nose.
And then how do you bring that good surface?
It's just snipping with scissors. The older the foam is, the smoother the surface you get, because modern foam tends to be quite crusty and open. Whereas this used to be the back of the settee we had.
A true puppeteer.
Kath and Ted made me Joe. Joe's dressed as a Welsh Border Morris, because my hobby is I go out looking for old chaps who know originally danced the Welsh Border Morris, you see, so Joe's keeping that tradition alive. I haven't practiced as much as I should have done with my jig doll, so if I'm being asked to dance, or if Joe's being asked to dance, could everybody else dance with him, please? But I do love him, and I'm really pleased to be, you know, involved with it. It's lovely.
Right, who's going to play something? Go on.
All together, as they say.
Penny dancing dolls, and I had a group of remedial children I was trying to teach craft at that time, and I thought if Rennie could make them as badgers, because they weren't nowhere near as nice a doll as this, they looked like something out of a stick box, and they shed limbs all over the place.
That was this one.
It wasn't as well made as that.
It was. This is the one.
Oh, was that?
Yes, his head used to fall off, his arm used to fall off, leg, and recently the foot's tape was falling off, but we fixed that, we think.
Well, I thought that this would be ideal for these remedial kids. And we actually made kits. We frowned upon now. We tried to engineer success for these kids, but it didn't seem to work. You're not allowed to do that sort of thing anymore. And so that the first ones were takeoffs from Rennie, and then they had the little article in the journal, in the magazine. I think everybody at some stage makes that doll. It's the little man from the
Yes,
from the
so
magazine.
how to make your little old man.
That's right. That's
Yes.
So we made our little old man, and Rennie also then was working on dolls because she wanted to make a clog-like action.
Yes.
So we had with a straight leg and just interlocking staples for the feet, and that did seem to work quite well. It gave a nice action. We tried then to find joints that children could make easily, and we had these linked aluminium joints. It was not a success, and it sounded awful.
No.
You know, it did very poor sound on that. It hadn't a particularly nice action either.
It's quite traditional. There's one in St Fagans Museum in Wales, quite an old one, which has that type
Yes,
of
but they're not nice
No,
that, are they? And always, the nice thing about making jig dolls is that you can use scraps of really nice piece of wood. So this is a nice piece of yew, but that's how big it was, or it was less than that. So by careful cutting, you managed to get a doll. But if you're making a doll out of yew,
1905 and before.
yeah. But well, I checked on the patent because the patent was stamped on the side,
Yes.
and in fact the patent was registered in 1910.
Was it?
So this must be after
Oh, well, there was a
1910.
similar one in 1905.
Yes. But this was Day and Company, wasn't it? Who made
Yes.
these? And I think it must be right in the 1920s. I think they're still making them.
Oh, right, in the
Dolls.
40s
In
actually.
the fall?
Yeah.
Latest then. But I have tried on various dolls to capture this sort of foot action, and I find it very difficult. It's a nice action, but I've not been able to copy that. And the one that I will dance for you. This is. So I never had musicians around who would dance or who could play for me, apart from Tim, who played occasionally.
The thing that puts me off some of them is the fact that the legs go completely, you know, right back and forwards go upwards. You know, the legs would never do. And I like the fact that this one seemed to do really naturalistic things. And somebody sent me this one after I'd done this on television. They sent me this, and that's got a really nice leg which will not bend backwards. So if you're interested in making them, it's such a simple device. They've just got where the where it comes together at the bottom is on an angle. That's all that's needed to stop it bending back. It's really simple if you want to have a look at that afterwards. And that's got a really nice foot movement. It's just a hole cut through the foot just to allow that much movement, and then the leg is put through and pinned like that. It's a really nice move, that.
And if anybody's interested in what that doll is, there's downstairs, my full collection of postcards is out in the library, and there's a box which is all jig dolls, which is postcards and photographs, and there's a thing about that one which is Dancing Diner. Val found one, and it had its original box and everything with the sort of advertising and things about it on. So that's in that box downstairs if you want to have a look in the jig doll box.
Do you want me to run the song on this?
Please, yeah.
The reason I've put a little bit of felt on there, and I've got rubber soles on his shoes, which you wouldn't probably believe. But when I did it on television, the guy said, it makes so much bloody noise. Drowning out your voice. So I put felt on there and rubber soles on it, but it didn't seem to make it any the softer. But during the introduction, I walked him out like this, so the music's going. So he's waiting for the thing to start, standing about, scratching his backside, whatever he does, and then the song starts. He sits on the corner of Bevington Bush, astride of an old packing case, and the dolls on the end of the plank, they were dancing as he sang with a smile on his face. Come day, go day. Is there anybody who's good on harmony? The harmony's magic goes, come day, go day, wishing me hard for Sunday. No? All right. Come day, go day, wishing me hard for Sunday, drinking buttermilk all the week, whiskey on a Sunday. His tired old hands banged a wooden plank, and the dolls, they danced the gear. It was a much better show than you ever would see at the Pivy or the New Brighton Pier. Come day, go day, wishing me hard for Sunday, drinking buttermilk all the week, whiskey on a Sunday. But 1902, old Seth Davy died, and his song was heard no more. And the three wooden dolls ended up in the bin. We used to sling him down there somewhere. And the plank went to mend some back door. Come day, go day, wishing me hard for Sunday, drinking buttermilk all the week, whiskey on a Sunday. Some stormy night down the Scotty roadway, with the wind blowing up from the sea. Anybody got wind?
Not enough beans last night.
If I just shut my eyes, I can hear old Seth. And I changed the words here because it used to annoy me to say singing to his dancing dolls 3. It used to really piss me off. Because it really annoys me in songs when they use a phrase which has never been heard in the actual language. If you're going to use that, you'd say singing to his 3 dancing dolls. You wouldn't say he was singing to his dancing dolls 3, by the way. So I changed it, singing to me brothers and me. Come day, go day, wishing me hard for Sunday, drinking buttermilk all the week, whiskey
Jackie doll, about 4 inches tall. I'll talk you on 4 months. Top hat and an evening dress. Because Jackie and I both had one as children in the 50s, I suppose. And they danced a bit like on a string and used to dance them little legs dance.
It was bloody ancient, isn't it?
Right, well, I mean, now the older than they are. But my uncles all had dancing dolls like this one. This, what's the black one? This one, called Black Tommies from Gateshead, or Black Jennies. And when I saw Jackie and Bridie, it must have been about 1964, 3-4, I thought. That's what they were talking about, you see. So I made this one, like a northeastern Black Tommy. And then I made this one here, which is a replica of one from Weekly Hill, which is and when I do them in performance, my dolls always stands to mouth music, because the doll ones have no musicians. And I usually do it as a part of our act, our set. But, so what I do is I dance one first. I dance one first, and now the rest hidden away. So I dance one, and I get all the audience to shout for more, what the mums do. And I get the two out, which Tom Chambers saw in an antique shop in Whitby or somewhere. So I thought I'll have two of them. And Tom used to shout, "Oh, the old Calcutta version." That's when they were made. And then when I've danced them for a bit, and then we shout for more, then I get the three dolls out. I dance these two dolls. Like I say, they all dance the same tune. It's one of the Irish tunes. These are awful. Skittle little little, you can join in. Little little do, skittle little little and then when the legs drops up.
And I looked at this book and I said, I've got one of them. And disappeared into the loft, and my mother had made by her father a jig doll called Fred, about so tall. And she put cotton wool instead of hair, had sort of beads for eyes and everything. And in fact, I sent some pictures to Pat.
Patches of
Patches of hair, And so I thought, well, I'm not going to dance Fred, because Fred's a bit of an antique, and I want to look after him. And I wanted actually a jig doll that I've used with people, because I've been a folk musician and various other bits and pieces. So I had a word with his friend. She said, well, I know an old guy who's a wood carver. In fact, he's carved a lot of the stone finishes around a lot of the large government buildings in London. And he's in his 80s, called Cyril. And so I took Fred round to Cyril and said, Cyril, here's Fred, I need a copy. He said, well, see what I can do. And he came up with what is called Cyril. And he made him out of heart oak and such sundry timbers. Thoroughly enjoyed the project. He must be about 90 by now, I reckon. And then a friend of mine said, well, he really ought to be a Morris dancer. Don't know why, I mean, some people have no taste. So, we actually made him a hat, and we put some bells on him. And recently I had a slight stint of the UB40s. So I've been around my daughter's school teaching them country dancing and also teaching them jig doll dancing. So that is basically Cyril. He dances to anything. He's not proud, like me. Speak to anyone, do anything. And he's, as I say, probably about 5 years old by now. But as I say to the girls at schools, you know, he's an old man, really. So that's jig dolls. And I say, that's how I got to know that.
good footnote.
Can we have a tune for
It is,
everybody
yeah.
for Darryl then?
It was interesting, actually, because Cyril, being a wood carver, he chose the right woods. And he played around with the joints to make sure that they were as free as possible.
Yeah.
I must admit, his do go like that, I'm afraid, Rolf, but you can't have everything in life. So, that's Cyril.
Music?
Yeah.
Catherine's next.
Oh, well,
It's all right.
Not
Don't know.
really, no. We came to Jig Dolls through puppets. So,
Well,
over to you.
we've been making puppets for 40 odd years ever since we were married in 1950. And I'd made marionettes, so fair-sized marionettes. So, 1971, when I started teaching, we joined the folk groups then. And so we wanted an act for a folk club. So I thought, well, Jig Dolls, yes, they're a folksy thing, but they're all little things, these things that happen. So for me, it's going to be a good one. Now, bear in mind that I was a technician in the Air Force and knew me physics, and I've also taught physics. That's the important. I'd made this thing this big. I'd made the locking lead joint, of course. But mine, if it's flexed slightly back, okay. But if it comes slightly forward, it locks solid, and it won't work. It's got to be flexed very, very slightly for a locking lead joint to actually work. That's why most of them, I think you'll find, come forward. They've got much more movement. So I made this thing, carved legs, carved head a lot. Little board, because they all use a little board. There's a thing called inertia. It won't work. It doesn't work. So I brought them down, and now I make them a proper size. But when we do the odd craft fair or the craft table at the folk weekends, we do the little jigglers, of course, for the kids. So this is the little jiggler. Now, I know that Pat doesn't like them if they're not men. They're not people, I should say. But we do have the little birds. And I tell the kids that he does a little rain dance, because the worms think it's raining, up they come and they with him, it does a little bit of street cred dance. Walk on. Now you won't walk with them a little ride. It's 3 hours a little ride. Let's see if you go on there. Walk on. And away she goes. Poetry in motion. Look out the back. Oh, well, yes. I mean, if the kids aren't really there, I say they go over the very big fence, which is the puissance, which is French for bloody Nora. And this walk was made for the three, the Appalachian dancers, but I thought, well, why not link a few together? So we but this is only a sort of a crowd raise, but then taking those little things a step further, with the little African ones, which we'd seen the pictures of, where you have rather similar to these, but the little bitty ones, and they're pairs like that. So rather than the string through the middle, I just put a control in there. So these are the world champion, over 60s, all T-dance disco champions. Whoops! Grandma, Grandpa, where you got to? Hey, oh, Grandma, put me down. T-dance disco.
For a gentleman going in Maidenhead, and I was so taken with it. I thought he's gorgeous. He's had a flower on the top, and we try and make everybody's different. And so this is my eccentric dancer, and I think he's lovely. The stick wants to be longer,
Make walking, that's very nice.
yes. He's got rather a nice little foot.
Yeah.
And he's been making this doll for how many years?
How many years is it? When
Just keep promising to make
When the plans
There's a subtle
It
difference.
was, we had a workshop at some stage, didn't we?
Oh, yes,
Rennie had
about 10 years ago.
Rennie had drawn up plans for these jig dolls, which got distributed amongst the workshop. And David got one of these plans because he was really keen to make a jig doll. Years ago.
Every time I saw you.
I said
He made that jig doll.
he wasn't keen to make it. I sent the
Oh,
plans.
was you sent for the plans?
I
Yeah.
saw it at Redcliffe Festival a long time ago.
Yes.
And I sent for the plans thinking you knocked me one up.
Yeah.
I had one as a child, you see, but I found my mother must have given it away. So that was it. And then you returned. Emerged with this, and I hunted round just the day before your card came, so we made it. And I hunted round for a birth announcement card. I got a beautiful one, and I got all about the gestation period and when he was born, and it got lost
And it
in the
never
post.
arrived. It got lost in the post, unfortunately, this did.
Anyway, we tried them once at Stockton Folk Club, and his leg came off because I got over enthusiastic in the accordion. So I tried to learn just to play with it, and.
The reason he looks like he does is another of my bright ideas that I've never got around to yet. A friend of mine's a keen painter of military models, you know, he's quite a skilled job in itself, is that. And he was showing me some of his catalogues, and he had one of these die-cast moulds of ship's figureheads. And you could send away for them, and they'd send you the figurehead. And quite heavy they are. About that stuff, it's very heavy. And the instructions about all the original history of the figurehead and how it was coloured and all the rest of it. Then you wanted, you see, an expert painter to paint it for you. But, well, that was my friend. And the idea was if I bought two of these and got him to paint them, then one of these days, I'm going to mount them on wood and make a pair of bookends. You see, I thought this was simple enough. That'll take another 10 years. But one of the two of them is more or less in that uniform, which is that of an ordinary seaman about the naval seaman about the beginning of the 19th century. So there we are.
So please have a long join in because the tunes
yes.
will be very ancient.
Yes, we haven't been practicing much.
partner over there in crime, Simon. Simon was busking before I was, and we were at Sidmouth Festival. And I was in a very crowded room, and I was standing on a chair because there was a lot of activity in the centre of the room. They were all looking at something, I didn't quite know what, but I think it was 2 dolls on the board. And they must have been joined, I reckon, and there was something else on the board, but I never did really see properly what it was, but I went home with this idea. Simon was already busking. I thought, these dancing dolls. That was the first time I'd ever heard or seen them really properly, or half seen them. So I had this idea, and I got a friend who I knew made them to make me these 2 down here. And I wanted to be able to dance them separately, but not joined in a row. So I put the board on my knee, and sort of developed from that. And I started going out on the street, with Simon at first. And then we argued a lot, but we were together far too much. So I decided we'd better separate. And I started busking by myself, which meant I had to develop it a bit more. So the dolls do silly things like, turn over a bit and other things, because it's like a 2-minute wonder. Because I'm on my own, I've actually had to put a bit of music on a small tape recorder, and I have that hiding under the chair, discreetly. I hope it doesn't get anybody upset, And fairly quiet. It's a fairly sort of quiet act. And, what? You can't what? I didn't bring the tape, obviously, because I've got Simon with me this weekend. But that's what I do. But I only do this lean times as well. Go out busking on the lean days. So, but it's all around Bath, Weston-super-Mare, Cheddar, you know, Yeovil, Taunton, places like that where I'm seen. And this is it, I suppose. And these dolls are made by a friend of mine in Cornwall. The rest of my dolls are on the table over there. They're all made by different people. 2 are made by us, and I have got an old one, similar to yours, but without the tin legs. Mine's later than yours, got the wooden legs. But he's cut on the side. So, if my hands aren't sticky, I'm very nervous, and they keep sticking, and I can't do nothing today. So we'll see how I get along.
Way back in the 60s, wasn't it? Yes. Seth Davey. It's funny how something like that, it sits in your subconscious. You think nothing of it for 10, 15 years or so. And then I happened to go to Montreal and I was researching French-Canadian step dance. And I went to a group called Les Saltilles, and they have in Montreal a place as big as Cecil Sharp House. And it's the only professional dance company in Canada, and they make the place pay. And I was quite impressed. But while I was there, I found that they sold jig dolls, and I came back with about 5 or 6 of these things, all of which I've sold, except for these 2, which keep as a matched pair, not only because the costume is the same, but the legs keep falling off, which is a bit of a nuisance.
Occupational hazard.
Joints are getting
My legs don't fall off. The rods come out, their backs and the dolls go flying.
So anyway, I then searched Montreal for a week, looking for some more of these because I heard that they are traditional to French-speaking Canada. Couldn't find any, wasted an entire week. So I went up to Quebec City, and almost every toy shop has got jig dolls for sale. quite amazing. Apparently they are used as percussion instruments in the French-Canadian dance bands, in the barn dance bands. And they actually mic them. They put a mic underneath the board.
That's where I got this one.
So I got this one, which is the really nice one. Again, it's sort of got impractical legs, but the feet hang nicely, and you can get a really nice, very fast sound out of them. And that one, incidentally, was $20, which I guess is about £10, which is not bad. And I got this one, and they sold 2 versions of this one. Unfortunately, I've broken the pole, so he doesn't work at the moment. But his arms, actually, you can spin them around quite nicely. And the 2 versions, one had a pipe and one didn't have a pipe. And so I got the one that didn't have a pipe. When I brought these 2 home, my father was, he'd just retired, and it took me about a year of persuading, and he started making these. Unfortunately, he'd only been doing that for about a year, and his mother became ill, and that was that. But he made about 3 or 4 of these. I haven't brought them with me. They're very precious. They don't travel because they're about the only thing that he made in his retirement. Then a few years later, I happened to, I was lucky enough to be sent down to Australia for a conference, and at the same time, there was the National Folk Festival at Sydney. And it was the only one for sale on the craft stall, and I snapped it up. I mean, it was absolutely, I couldn't even buy an extra one for Pat, I'm afraid. I did think of it, because by then I'd come across Pat at the Reading Ploddies Festival and with a marvellous exhibition and jig dolls, and she continues to be a very valued guest. And I hope you're going to bring your dolls this year to Reading. And then finally at Christmas, I was invited over to Berea to teach sort of, I guess, traditional English social dance and Scottish social dance. That's with stepping in. And there's a gentleman there called Raymond McLean, McLean Family Band, and he makes these. And I thought, right, this is a jig doll.
I didn't hear where you went to for that.
This is Berea in Kentucky, sorry, in America. And this actually hasn't danced yet. In fact, I only opened the package about an hour ago because I also sent Pat one.
Yep.
And she's got that colour and I've got this colour. And again, they're actually very, very reasonably priced. I think Raymond makes wonderfully carved places. He's a professional fiddle player by profession, but I think he's got a wonderful hobby. He makes these. So, sorry? I don't know what it dances like.
Let's see.
But what we need to do is we need to try, and I need Pat to join in with me.
Let's have the first rehearsal today.
We'll have the first rehearsal of these from Kentucky. By the way, when I was at Kentucky, the entire Christmas Country Dance School was basically all English Playford dancing, and I thought, what a wonderful place to go and see Appalachian step dancing, big circle mounting dancing, and I didn't see any at all.
Right, who's going to play as a tune?
Here we go.
I'm playing
around with me for eventualities like this because it's a nice thin version of elastoplast, you know, and a bit round the end of the rod helps it to hold.
I stuffed a tissue in the back of my head. That's a good idea.
I was going to say, Pat, actually, has anyone sold a book that's stopping the thin thing falling?
I'm telling you a jig doll rather than doing it. On May Day down in Padstow, there's a great day out. All the drums come out, the avios and the accordions, and everybody on faith. But the next day is the intimate time in Padstow, when all the tourists have gone and all the trippers and all the folks have gone. It's just for Padstow people. And then all the other fellas come out and they do, well, for example, they play the drum like this, the old-fashioned way. Charlie Bate used to step dance. Nobody ever used to see him do that. And there was one little old guy, he was a traveller. And he used to come in the pub with his 2 dancing dolls, which were 1930s celluloid. One was a hula dance and one was a sailor, and they were wired up very crudely. And nobody took any notice. And the band's playing away and the accordions going. And he would just sit there with his dancing doll. dancing doll, totally artless, and just do this thing, and nobody took any notice. But the bizarre thing about this was that he had 3 legs between the 2 dancers. And you've guessed it. The next year he came in and there were 2 legs on one and none on the other. So, but they're wired together, so you know, it's all right. 3 years later the guy came in and you can guess, no legs. And it's the only time I've ever seen dancing dolls on the stumps. And he literally used to do a 2-hour session. Just on the hips. But that's my story.
Right, Tony.
I'll say it.
Well, tell us how you got into it then, if you're not a jig doll person.
Well, I am a Cornishman by birth, and
You'd never tell.
Never mind.
and I suppose 40 years ago, I saw my first jig doll, which was Bob Cann's Sailor Jan, and when we used to go out onto the moor and go to his barn dance and things, it must be well over 40 years now. And I saw it, and that was Bob doing his dancing doll, you know. And then a few years later, I was working for the EFDSS, and we used to do summer schools in Portsmouth and Southampton and Bangor and all that. And Pat Shaw was usually on the staff with me. Patrick Shaw, if anybody remembers him. And he had just come back from America, from the Pinewood summer camp. And he brought back an American one, which wasn't anything like the jig doll that I thought jig dolls should look like, in that he didn't have any clothes on. He was just a plain sort of Pinewood doll. And then nothing happened until I moved up to the northeast of England, and I was up here for sort of 9 years, and Jackie and Bridie came to the Darlington Club that I was running in the Golden Cock in Darlington, and they suddenly produced their doll, and we suddenly got this, you know, jig doll mania together. And Malcolm made the black thing. What do you call it? Black jelly?
Black jelly.
Yeah. Which is just like yours, but smaller.
That for a few years. It is, yeah.
Yeah, that was the one that, yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, it's very uninteresting, isn't it?
It's not, isn't it?
And I fell in love with Whitby as soon as I got into the northeast. I went to Whitby, and I used to run weekend courses at Whitby, and then we started the folk week. And one year when I was over there, just across the bridge on the old part of Whitby, I was walking through the back streets, and in the window of somebody's little cottage were these 2 fellas just sitting there like that. And I went into the house, into the cottage, and said, you know, what are those? She said, well, I don't know. They've been there ever since I can remember, and my father before me, and so on. So I said, well, it looks as though they're jig dolls, you know. And I got a bit of wood, and I called out like that, and I sort of did that to it, and they were fascinated with that. You know, I said, well, isn't that lovely? I said, yeah. He said, well, you can have them. We don't have any need of them. So, so that's the Whitby. I don't know what you call them, but they'd be
Whitby connection.
but Whitby black
Jets.
The Jets. The Jets. The Jets.
Thank you.
Oh, they'll be Ted's, will they? Are those Ted's on the back there?
If you have them fall off and the little bits of metal go wrong, I've found that staples work a treat.
Yes.
Ordinary staples.
They do, yes.
Push them
Yes.
through and bend them over.
Bend them over. Very traditional,
Yeah, I expect it to be